What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm James Salvatore, and today I have an interesting comparison for you all. As most of you have probably heard by now, Porsche has an all-new electric vehicle for 2020, the Taycan. However, most of you are probably wondering to yourselves, how does it compare to the vehicle we all know already? It's been around for about a decade at this point, the Panamera, because they both share some similar characteristics, but they're very different at the same time. And besides the obvious fact that this is an electric vehicle and this isn't, today I'm going to go over some of the major key differences between the two vehicles and compare some pros and cons between the vehicles, as well as go out for a drive and share my thoughts on the driving characteristics of each. But before we get into the video, be sure to help me out by smashing that like button, because it really helps us small creators get our content promoted. And be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notification to be alerted when I post my future videos. On the channel, I usually do new car reviews, new car comparisons, classics, exotics. So if that's your kind of thing, be sure to stick around. And with that said, I'm gonna leave you off with some beauty shots. Getting into the Taycan, the first thing that strikes you is how special this car feels. You know, I feel like other electric vehicle manufacturers just haven't really, you know, they've had some really cool looking designs and whatnot, and they've implemented cool new features in these cars, but they're just missing the soul. Yeah, you know, like say like you get a Tesla or something, it's really, really fast in a straight line, just like this thing is. But this thing isn't just about pure straight line acceleration. This thing actually genuinely brings out emotion in the driver. You know, it genuinely feels like a sports car driving experience when you hop behind the wheel of one of these things. All right, let's get a little acceleration in. Wow! Yeah, as you can see, when you hit the gas in this thing, you have to focus. This thing is just something else. I mean, when you hit the gas in this thing, it feels like a rocket. It really does. Going into a turn, this thing just feels so well balanced. One thing I will say is, I do feel like the tire on this car is limiting. I would say if you buy this thing, the first thing that I would do if I bought one of these is I would put Michelin Pilot Super Sports on this car, because it needs it. This Continental all-season tire is just, it's just not enough. You could start to feel the car, you know, you could definitely feel where the grip is limited in this car, but just the fact that I could say that I could feel where the grip is limited in this car just goes to show you how much this car actually communicates with you as the driver. You know, since most of the weight is in the center of the vehicle, it handles so nicely. It doesn't push in the corners, and you know, it feels so nimble for what it is, because it has the four-wheel steering. But when you hit it, wow, this thing just gets up and goes. And the brakes in this thing are something to behold. These carbon ceramics just have so much stopping power. I mean, it's going to be the same in the Panamera as well, but I just thought I'd mention it because wow. But I mean, you know, pitching it into a turn, the air suspension does such a good job of keeping this car flat. I feel like a lot of people don't fully understand this car. When you hear electric vehicle, you know, now we have this perception in our heads of crazy straight line acceleration, which this car has. It definitely has it. It feels like a rocket. But this car feels special. You know, you actually want to drive it harder. You want to take it into turns and you want to go around the windy bits because it's genuinely fun to do that in this car. The Panamera I see as more of a luxury experience. It handles beautifully too, but in my opinion, I have not driven the Turbo S e-hybrid yet, but driving the GTS, it definitely feels like more of a heavier car. I definitely see the electric motor helping the Panamera out a little bit in terms of like immediacy, you know, because with the traditional motor, you're not gonna get the power delivery that this car has. You won't even touch it, not even close. I'd say if you're looking for something different, this is not a bad choice. As long as, you know, you acknowledge the fact that taking this thing on long trips is going to be somewhat of a challenge because you have to keep in mind that you have to allow time for you to charge the vehicle. You have to keep in mind where the locations are to charge the vehicle as well. But Porsche has a pretty neat trick built into the navigation software where it will actually plan your trip around the superchargers, which is pretty neat. To me, the pros of the Taycan over the Panamera is this definitely feels like more of a sports car experience. This car feels more exotic overall to me. The inside of the Panamera feels a little more luxurious, yes, in my opinion, just by design, not because of materials chosen. But this by far feels more exotic to me. You know, you drive down the street and people look at you in this thing. This thing commands attention. It has a little bit more presence than the Panamera because it's more common. This, people see this and they're like, wow, that's really different. It makes people double take. Now, when it comes to the stereo system, unfortunately, I can't play music for you guys because of YouTube copyrights. However, the Burmester audio system in this car is a definite must. I mean, if you're spending this much money on, you know, a Taycan, you could afford the Burmester audio system. I mean, it makes all the difference. The Bose system isn't bad, but it doesn't impress me for what the price point of this car is. If you're somebody who really cares about the stereo system and you want something that really bumps, you need the Burmester audio system. And the last pro that I have to this car, in my opinion, is definitely the acceleration. The acceleration in this car is just so different. I mean, it takes you by surprise every time you hit the pedal, just how much this thing will shove you back in your seat. I mean, it's truly an amazing experience. And it definitely makes me have a little bit more faith in where, you know, the car industry is going for driving enthusiasts, because this thing is a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what Porsche does with other cars with electric power plants in the future. I mean, it's truly going to be amazing. Will it be different? Yes, but I don't think it will be a bad thing. Now, the major con that I see with this car is obviously the range. The range in the Turbo S model is not that good. At most, if you're really babying the car, maybe you'll see 250 miles out of this thing, but that's really not enough if you want to take it on trips. Like, I'm not saying that you have to go on a cross-country road trip. I just mean, like, say, you know, you live in Connecticut, you want to go to Vermont or whatnot. Chances are you're going to have to stop and charge, you know, halfway between. And, you know, say in states that are a little bit more rural, are you going to find those charging stations? And that's a big unknown right now, and that would definitely limit me in my purchase, because I enjoy going on road trips and I would want to road trip this thing, but I don't know how possible that is right now. The network's obviously getting better of chargers, but it's not quite there yet. And, you know, when you do charge, you still have to wait a significant amount of time. You know, think about it. You go fill up your car with gas, you don't really think much about it, but with this, to get a quick charge out of it, you still have to wait around for a half hour to wait for this thing to charge. And that's not something that I would want to do. Now, if this was my commuter car, you know, I was, you know, working with it, and, you know, at most I have maybe 100, 120 miles a day driven, and I could just go charge it every day at home, I wouldn't view buying this car as a bad thing. Now, from a fun perspective, I could actually see this being a car I would want to put on a track and really put through its paces. And I don't know if I would say the same for the Panamera. You know, the Panamera is a very fun car, but it's not something that I'm like, I really want to see what this thing can do on a track. This is. Because this really does give you that genuine sports car performance. Overall, I recommend the Taycan for those of you who are looking for more of a sports car driving experience. This thing just feels so connected to the road, and it's just such a different experience that why wouldn't you want to have this? I mean, yes, you could argue the fact that, you know, you don't have, you know, that awesome V8 sound behind you and whatnot, but this is special in a different way, and it makes you feel special when you drive it. It puts a smile on your face, and that's one of the most important things. I actually, during this review, just had, you know, a fellow viewer in a Tesla pull up next to me, and I was talking to him for a few minutes. He was just so excited to see this car on the road and see that there was a company out there producing something like this in an electric vehicle format that, you know, it just makes you feel good. And I'm sure that if I stopped at other places, that I would definitely get more people coming up to me talking about the car. It's just one of those cars. To your decision. This, if before I drove this and I envisioned what I wanted an electric car to be, this would be it. Right away, immediately getting into the GTS, right after being in the Taycan, the first thing that hits you is, in comfort mode, how much less smooth the traditional vehicle actually is in terms of acceleration. I mean, you know, not saying that this is a jerky, lurchy car by any means. It's a very good traditional car, but I'm just saying you really notice, you know, how smooth the power delivery is with an electric vehicle, especially the Taycan. I mean, it was so smooth taking off the line, nice and even. Whereas this, you know, you're feeling the changes, you know, you're feeling the vibration and whatnot from the engine, you're hearing it. It's very different. I'm glad that I drove the Taycan first before driving this. I mean, I've driven a GTS, I've reviewed a GTS before, so that's why I did that, but it's nice to kind of go directly from that right into this thing to give you my first initial impressions on what's different. Now, some of you may be saying to yourselves at this point, well, it's not really accurate to compare a Turbo S to the Panamera GTS. Well, to those of you, I say that the only thing that's different between that car and this car is power. Now, this car may not have as much power, but according to my friends at Porsche, it literally has the same suspension setup. So in terms of handling and overall comfort and how it feels on the road, they're going to be next to identical. So that's why I chose to make this comparison with this vehicle. Now, another thing that hits me right away when I come into this car from the Taycan is the driving position. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about the Taycan is how much of a sports car it felt like. This thing doesn't feel as sports car-like because you have a longer nose. The dash is a little bit longer, so it feels like you're really looking out over a much longer hood compared to the Taycan, where, you know, the hood swoops right down like a 911 because you don't have an engine up there. Also, the wheel arches aren't as large as in the 911, so, you know, I would say it's a little bit more difficult to place the car. Not too difficult, guys. Don't take it out of proportion. It's just that comparing it directly to the Taycan, I would say that, you know, you're looking out over a longer hood. It feels like a bigger car. And in some senses, to me, that's a negative, but in others, it's a positive. This car feels extremely spacious, whereas this definitely feels a little bit more roomy. You know, like you have to reach over to touch your passenger, whereas, you know, the center console was really narrow in the Taycan, and it felt like, you know, you were kind of more on top of each other. This car definitely is much softer on the road than the Taycan too, in terms of road feel. Let's put it into Sport Plus and see how much it firms up. Now, putting this car into Sport Plus, right away you could definitely feel the suspension firm up. Now, I think the Taycan is slightly firmer, but they're pretty close actually. One thing that I'm noticing a big difference with is brake feel. One of the things I am noticing too, coming right out of that car, right off the bat, is the brake feel. Now the Taycan, I am not certain, but I'm going to assume that it's using brake-by-wire, because you could definitely notice a little bit of a disconnect in pedal modulation and feel. Whereas when you get into this car, it immediately feels much more direct, much more responsive. It just feels a little bit sharper. You could tell where the bite is in these brakes a little bit easier than you could in the Taycan. In terms of steering feel, in Sport, I have the car in Sport Plus now, and I could definitely tell you that the steering is much more direct in the Taycan than it is in this car. You know, the inputs aren't as precise, they aren't as direct. You know, you put a little bit of input into the wheel, it doesn't all feel like it's translating to the road. Whereas in the Taycan, the littlest inputs were transmitted directly to the road right away, and you felt a little bit more connected to the car. Now, one thing that I could say that I am really enjoying about the Panamera is the sound. Hands down, I mean, you know, the futuristic sound of the Taycan, they did their best to make it sound cool. However, nothing to me in my mind replaces the sound of a V8. And this V8 in particular, you know, sounds amazing. It really does. It really does. I mean, just listen to this. It just sounds so good. And I'm sure with a little bit of help from the hybrid system and the turbo hybrid, in the Turbo SE, that this car would feel a little bit more immediate in its acceleration, similar to the Taycan. I really look forward to making that comparison. But for now, what we're left with is just the feel of each car for the most part. But let's get a little acceleration in. Oh man. Don't worry, guys. Just because it doesn't have 750 horsepower doesn't mean that this car is no fun. I mean, this thing still feels properly fast. It really does. And having the sound definitely adds to the experience. And also, you know, I didn't notice it initially just because to me the Taycan was still new as I was driving it. But I have a feeling that after a certain period of time, I might miss the absence of being able to shift the gears and have that little bit of control over the car that I'm used to in a traditional car. I mean, like, we take it for granted that, you know, we could change the gears and we have these flappy paddle or manual transmissions in traditional cars, but in that car, really the only sense of satisfaction you get is railing it around a turn, is really taking a turn aggressively, or hitting the gas. Just listen to those crackles and pops. Yeah, nothing's gonna replace that, guys. I'm sorry. Wow. I'll stand by what I said earlier in the fact that this definitely feels like more of a luxury car than a sports car. The Taycan, if you're looking for the sports car experience, is definitely the way to go. However, this thing handles very good as well. And this engine just pulls so nicely. Even though this isn't the highest performance model, I mean, this still feels like it's power. This still feels like a nice balance. I will say, in terms of overall ergonomics and the way things are laid out, I do prefer the Panamera over the Taycan. Being in this, having the haptic buttons and, you know, not that screen for everything, especially like little things like raising and lowering the volume, I really do prefer the way this is laid out. I don't feel that the secondary screen in the Taycan was really a necessary step. I think they should have stayed with you know, the haptic feedback buttons that you get in pretty much all of the Porsche models. This thing handles really well as well. It's just that it doesn't feel as firm on the road as the Taycan did. But does it still inspire confidence? Absolutely. I mean, pitching it into a turn right now, yeah, you know, this thing feels properly planted. I would definitely say that, but you don't have as much of a concept of what the front end is doing. Definitely not. The Taycan, you could definitely feel where its limits were in terms of grip in the front end when you're in a turn, and I think that was totally tire limit. Whereas in this car, you're kind of just in the turn, and you don't really have a concept of where the limit is. Now earlier I said I was going to be comparing both the stereo systems in these cars, seeing that they had the Burmester upgraded systems, and I have to say that for whatever reason, the system in the Panamera is significantly better than the one in the Taycan. The one in the Taycan was really good, but if you're looking, it had very deep bass, but it seems that it was lacking the punchiness, because I listened to the same songs in this car that I did in that car. This one definitely has much more crisp, much more clear bass, and the trebles and the mids were definitely a little bit more separated in this car, which I liked. And I already know I'm going to get this question in the comments. What surround mode did you use? Did you use any of that? I made sure to put the identical settings on both cars, and there is a difference. Just thought you should know that, if that weighs into your decision at all. At this point, the Panamera is a very refined car. They've had a decade to perfect this car at this point, and it really shows. The Taycan is in its first year, and it's as good as it is. This car definitely feels like more of a luxurious experience when you hop into it right away. And I honestly prefer the layout of this interior over the Taycan. However, the Taycan definitely feels like more of a driver's car than this. Even though, yes, you might be saying, what are you talking about? You have the V8, you have the PDK, but you don't have the sense of connection that you have in that car. Besides the brake modulation, because of the brake-by-wire, that car makes you feel a lot more connected to it, because it handles flatter, the steering inputs are more direct and more precise, and overall, it just, all that ties in together for a very special experience. It's very different from anything you'll ever drive, and this is definitely more conventional in that sense. But sometimes change is good, and if you're looking for a change, then I strongly recommend the Taycan for you. The Panamera, if you're looking for more of a comfortable luxury experience, I would say go for this car. But if you're looking for more of a sports car experience and something with a little bit more of an exotic feel, I would say go for the Taycan. You really can't go wrong, as long as you realize your limitations with range. Well, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it for you. If you have any other questions on the cars, be sure to drop comments in the comments section, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you'd like any other Porsche models to be compared, drop a comment for that too. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, because it really helps us small creators. And be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you don't miss out on my future content. But before we go, I'd like to say a special thanks to my friends down at Porsche of Fairfield, Connecticut. They're an awesome group of people to work with. They're super friendly, super accommodating, and they have a lot of rare models in their inventory. So if you're in the market for a new Porsche, be sure to check them out. I'm gonna leave a link in my description below so you could do so. And with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next video.